Hello? Hello. Can you guys hear me? The microphone was off for some reason. Every time I change something, or if just an update comes, half of the things get fucked. But here we go. Hey, but there we are. Ruby just got in my lap as well, like a second before I started. Hey. She's not been doing so good. Oh. So we're gonna continue today. We did UI. Now we're gonna go to prettier transitions, creating items. That's gonna be important. Okay, cool. I think we can continue right where we left off.
Now that we have covered the basics of UI, we can work on a pretty level transition.
Let me just go a little bit back where we left off.
Now that we have covered the basics of UI, red, and this also works across multiple scenes. Cool, so this one is working super well. I think the logic here keeps on getting a bit more complicated, so I hope all of this is still making sense. The major new thing is that now we are passing entire nodes into other functions, which is a perfectly fine thing to do. I hope that was useful, and for the next part, we can actually work on a transition between the two levels. Now that we have covered the basics of UI, we can work on a pretty level transition. We already have a level transition, but it doesn't look very good. So let's make this a bit nicer. Basically what we are going to do, we're going to take a canvas layer, a color rectangle, and an animation player to create a transition. We are fading to black when we are leaving a level, and we are fading from black to a transparent color once we are entering a level. All of this will also be auto-loaded into every scene, so it is easily accessible. I want to start by creating another scene, and this scene has to be, once again, a canvas layer. That way it's ignoring the camera. This I want to rename right away to a transition, let's call it transition layer. The first node we're going to add is going to be a color rectangle. This color rectangle is going to get a black color, and I want it to cover the entire window. And with a control node, this is quite easily done. Cool, with that, we have a transition layer. This I want to save right away inside of globals, and let's call it transition layer, the name works. And now inside of project settings, there we have auto load. I want to add not a script, but a whole scene, which Godot is perfectly happy with. If I now open this, we have a transition layer name, which is perfectly fine, so I want to add this one as well. If I now run the game, we are getting a black screen, and that is because you can see it under remote. We have globals and then a transition layer. And this transition layer is pure black right now, so everything else is going to be black as well. And note here as well that this transition layer comes before the outside level. But still, inside of the game, it's on top of it. You could change that, but I do want to keep it, because later on, the transition layer has to be on top of the outside level anyway. So let's change the transparency. The way we would be doing that is by adding an animation player. This animation player is going to get, for now, a single animation. I guess we could call it fade to black. We have to add one track for a property. We want to cover the color rect node, and in there, I want to get the modulate property. We have to add two keys, one at the beginning, and this value should be purely transparent. And then at the end, we want to add another key, and this one should be pure black. So pure black with full transparency. That way, if I play the animation, we are fading to black. So this is working really nicely. Once again though, we have to figure out when to play this animation. And for that, I'm going to add a script to the transition layer. This one can be empty, and I want to create it. And now I want to create a function that I call change underscore.
Wait, he's going way too fast for me able to do this.
There, I want to get the modulate property. We have to add two keys. one at the beginning. And this value should be purely transparent. And then at the end, we want to add another key, and this one should be pure black. So pure black with full transparency. That way, if I play the animation, we are fading to black. So this is working really nicely. Once again though, we have to figure out when to play this animation. And for that, I'm going to add a script to the transition layer. This one can be empty, and I want to create it. And now I want to create a function that I call change_scene. This one is going to get one argument that I called target. And the value for that is going to be a string. Also, to be a bit more consistent, the return value for this function should be void. Once we are calling this function, I want to get my animation player and then play the animation fade to black. After the animation is done, I want to get the tree and then call the method change_scene_to_file and pass in the target. Why that is useful? If I hide the animation and go, for example, to the outside.gd file. Right now, we are simply changing scene to file, and this works so far. But this is not what I want to do anymore. So instead, let me copy the target and get rid of all of this. Instead, I want to get the transition layer, and then on that,
get tree. Change to file.
is useful. If I hide the animation and go, for example, to the outside.gd file. Right now, we are simply changing scene to file, and this works so far. But this is not what I want to do anymore. So instead, let me copy the target and get rid of all of this. Instead, I want to get the transition layer, and then on that, run change scene. And I realized I didn't save the transition layer. So now if I save it and go back to the outside level, if I now type change_scene, Godot should be predicting it. In there now, I want to pass in the target. This is almost going to work. If I now run the entire game, we are still getting pure black. And that is because if I go back to the transition layer, by default, the value for the color rectangle is a pure black. This is not what I want. I want to set the transparency to 0. So that way, if I run the game, we can see the actual game. But now, if I go into the transition area, we are still not seeing anything. The reason for that is that once we're entering this area, we are starting to play the animation, but we are immediately changing the scene, so the animation doesn't actually matter. For that, we have to learn one new concept, and that is called await. Await does what the name implies. It awaits another kind of event. For example, an event we could be looking for would be the animation player, and then animation_finished. So we want to play the animation, then we want to wait for the animation to finish, and then we want to change the scene. If I now run the game and I walk into there, okay, this didn't exactly work. But you can see, if I go in there, the player stops, and after about a second, we are transitioning. So now, at the very least, we have a delay. And the reason why it didn't work, if I go back to the scene, this color rectangle always has a pure transparency. But this shouldn't be the case. I want this to be actually visible. With that, the animation player is actually going to show this modulate. So now if I run this and move in there, we are actually fading to black, but now we have loaded the other scene, but we are not fading from black to a transparent color again. But that we can fix quite easily. And there are actually two ways of approaching this. The first one would be inside of the animation player. I want to add a new animation.
He's going... Am I crazy or is he going much faster than before? Transition layer. I fucked something up. On the outside. Mm-hmm. Res. Scenes. Levels. Inside. .cn. I think I did not put it into globals, so it does not get called in. Let me see. Globals. I don't know if he did it this way. It was going very fast. But now this should work. It'll be. Okay. Let's see. We just have a black. Hey, Laudon. Welcome to the stream, my man. How's it going? Yeah, she's yawning. Oh, can you even hear me, Ruby? I can't get to the microphone because of you. Oh. So here we are transition change scene.
Score finished. So we want to play the animation, then we want to wait for the animation to finish, and then we want to change the scene. If I now run the game and I walk into there, okay, this didn't exactly work. But you can see, if I go in there, the player stops And after about a second, we are transitioning. So now, at the very least, we have a delay. And the reason why it didn't work, if I go back to the scene, this color rectangle always has a pure transparency, but this shouldn't be the case. I want this to be actually visible. With that, the animation player is actually going to show this modulate. So now if I run this and move in there, we are actually fading to black, but now we have loaded the other scene, but we are not fading from black to a transparent color again. But that we can fix quite easily. And there are actually two ways of approaching this. The first one would be inside of the animation player. I want to add a new animation, and let's call this one reveal. For this one, once again, I want to get a property track, get the color rectangle, get the modulate property. And for this one, I want to get a key that should be pure black by default. So I want this to be completely black. And then after 1 second, or whatever amount of time you want, I want this to be completely transparent. Once we have the animation, I can look at the script again, and then get the animation player and play the reveal animation. If I have all of that,
I fucked something up. He was too fast. Jesus. Oh, I don't think I put a transition layer properly. Something's not right. It's maybe that I just woke up like an hour ago, so I'm not...
once again, a canvas layer. That way, it's ignoring the camera. This I want to rename right away to a transition.
Let's
call
go
it
from the
transition
top.
layer. The first node we're going to add is going to be a color rectangle.
Yeah.
This color rectangle is going to get a black color, and I want it to cover the entire window. And with a control node, this is quite easily done. Cool. With that, we have a transition layer. This I want to save right away.
Yeah, ironic. Yeah. I am. But look. Wait. We're almost done. How you doing, man?
Inside of globals, and let's call it transition layer. The name works. And now inside...
Wait, what inside of
we have a
globals?
transition layer. This I want to save right away inside of globals, and let's call it transition layer. The name works. And now inside of project
Okay,
settings, there we have auto load. I want to add not a script, but a whole scene, which Godot is perfectly happy with. If I now open this, we have a transition layer name, which is perfectly fine. So I want to add this one as well. If I now run the game, we are getting a black screen. And that is because you can see it under remote. We have globals and then a transition layer. And this transition layer is pure black right now. So everything else is going to be black as well. And note here as well that this transition layer comes before the outside level. But still, inside of the game, it's on top of it. You could change that, but I do want to keep it, because later on, the transition layer has to be on top of the outside level anyway. So let's change the transparency. The way we would be doing that is by adding an animation player. This animation player is going to get, for now, a single animation. I guess we could call it fade to black. We have to add one track for a property, we want to cover the color rect node, and in there, I want to get the modulate property. We have to add 2 keys, one at the beginning, and this value should be purely transparent. And then at the end, we want to add another key, and this one should be pure black. So pure black with full transparency. That way, if I play the animation, we are fading to black. So this is working really nicely. Once again though, we have to figure out when to play this animation. And for that, I'm going to add a script to the transition layer. This one can be empty, and I want to create it. And now I want to create a function that I call change_scene. This one is going to get one argument that I called target. And the value for that is going to be a string. Also, to be a bit more consistent, the return value for this function should be void. Once we are calling this function, I want to get my animation player and then play the animation fade to black. After the animation is done, I want to get the tree and then call the method change scene to file and pass in the target. Why that is useful if I hide the animation and go, for example, to the outside.gd file. Right now, we are simply changing scene to file, and this works so far. But this is not what I want to do anymore. So instead, let me copy the target and get rid of all of this. Instead, I want to get the transition layer, and then on that, run change scene. And I realized I didn't save the transition layer. So now if I save it and go back to the outside level, if I now type change_scene, Godot should be predicting it. In there now, I want to pass in the target. This is almost going to
res scenes levels inside. Let me see. If I drag and drop it, maybe I didn't put it in the same place, and that's the problem. But no, that should be this, right? That's fine.
Because if I go back, we are still getting pure black. And that is because if I go back to the transition layer, by default, the value for the color rectangle is a pure black. This is not what I want. I want to set the transparency to 0. So that way, if I
Okay, the weighting is there, but the transition is not. The animation is not.
run the game, we can see the actual game. But now, if I go into the transition area, we are still not seeing anything. The reason for that is that once we're entering this area, we are starting to play the animation, but we are immediately changing the scene, so the animation doesn't actually matter. For that, we have to learn one new concept, and that is called await. Await does what the name implies. It awaits another kind of event. For example, an event we could be looking for would be the animation player, and then animation_finished. So we want to play the animation, then we want to wait for the animation to finish, and then we want to change the scene. If I now run the game and I walk into there, okay, this didn't exactly work. But you can see, if I go in there, the player stops, and after about a second, we are transitioning. So now, at the very least, we have a delay. And the reason why it didn't work, if I go back to the scene, this color rectangle always has a pure transparency. But this shouldn't be the case.
He already changed that like 3 times during this video. But now it's going to be black when we start the game. Isn't it?
I want this to be actually visible. With that, the animation player is actually going to show this modulate. So now if I run this and move in there, We are actually fading to black, but now we have loaded the other.
So that's my problem. He starts the game and it's fine, but with me it's the whole screen is black. Why? We do start the animation here at 100% transparency. Maybe it needs to be black. I don't think that plays a role. Oh, it does! Why would that change anything? Oh, okay. There we go. That's interesting. So if the default color of something and then the animation, when the animation starts, is not the same, it doesn't pick it up. That's fucking strange. I don't think we need to reset it. I think it works every time. Because it gets played again and again in code when this happens, right? It doesn't work the other way, but it does work when we enter each time. Okay.
We are not fading from black to a transparent color again. But that we can fix quite easily. And there are actually two ways of approaching this. The first one would be inside of the animation player. I want to add a new animation. And let's call this one reveal. For this one, once again, I want to get a property track, get the color rectangle, get the modulate property. And for this one, I want to get a key that should be pure black by default. So I want this to be completely black. And then after 1 second or whatever amount of time you want, I want this to be completely transparent. Once we have the animation, I can look at the script again and then get the animation player and play the reveal animation. If I have all of that, I can see it in my animation player. So I am moving from pure black to purely transparent. And then inside of fade to black, I'm doing the opposite, which is pretty much exactly what I want. So now if I am trying all of this, we can see the game, I can move in there, we have a transition, and now we are revealing the other level. And this should also work. Right now it only works in one way, but at least this way, it is working really well. Which means there's only one more thing to do, an exercise. Instead of playing this reveal animation, we could simply play another animation backwards. And what I want to play backwards is fade to black. So if you look at the animation player, we basically have from transparent to black and then from black to transparent. Which means if we reverse one of these animations, we get the other animation. Both approaches here would be fine. And let me actually test all of this. Now we still get a level transition. So this is working just fine. Cool. For this part, the exercise is going to be quite easy. I want you guys to play the transition when the player is leaving the inside level.
Okay. Don't we already have a function for something like that? Do we call it in the level? On gate player entered gate. Aha, that should be inside the inside then. So we do this. Inside. On exit. We do this. That. But outside, right? Let's see. What? Because it's playing the current scene. What the fuck is going on? Hmm. Everything was fine a second ago. Ah, so that's what I mean by resetting. But he didn't do that and it works. Or am I crazy? Let me actually check. Hmm. Yeah, you're right. It doesn't get... This gets stuck, kind of. Hmm. Hmm. So you were saying like here I should have ready, right? And then color rect dot modulate equals modulate dot a, right, is for the alpha. I know, I remembered. Let's see. Okay. So I think just here we need to... There we go. There we go. Okay, that works. Inside level. Outside level. Thank you. Isn't there a way to just like click it here somewhere for that to be the case, so that every time it plays it restarts? Or it goes to the... Wait, is that in here? No, that's looping. That wouldn't work, right? Loop is not the same as restarting. Maybe? Let's actually try this. Because we actually wait till the animation finishes, so one loop should be enough, right? Nope. Okay. It starts with whatever value your current frame is on. That seems wrong. Aha, that's looping. Okay, that's not helpful at all. Okay. No loop for you, and no loop for you. What? Doesn't it save every time I start a game? Oh, I broke it. Guys, I broke it. What the fuck? Aha. Ah. No. No loop. What's the other loop? Animation looping. There we go. I didn't notice that I was toggling 3 different ping pong. Okay. Okay, this seems to work. Let me try to understand a bit better what we are doing here. We have a transition layer with a rectangle that's clear to me. In the outside scene, we already have this function because of the for the speed. When the player enters the rectangle, we slow him down. And then we call the global and we send this as the target to the change scene function. The target, it gets it here. It plays fade to black, waits till it finishes. Aha, and then here it goes into the tree and fetches that target. And changes the scene to that, and then it plays the review. Okay. Yeah, that's really weird. It's kind of weird that that didn't come into play when we were looking at. Oh, sorry. When we were looking at the animation player at the start, I don't remember that was a thing. I just thought like if you set everything up in the animation player and you have it from 0 to whatever seconds, every time you press play, it's gonna start from 0 and not from where it left off. That's really weird. Like, why wouldn't that be the case? But okay.
All we have to do is go to our scripts, and I want to look at not outside, but inside.gd. Currently, we're getting a packed scene, and this is not what I want anymore. Also, I want to extend the window and get rid of all of this. Instead, I want to have the transition layer and then change scene. I think I called it. Instead of transition layer, change scene. Yes, this one works. This one wants to have the target node, and I think the best way to approach that one is to simply drag it in from the scenes. So in scenes, we have the levels, and I want to go to the outside scene. So I can paste this in there, or rather drag it in there, and now we should be good to go. Let's try it. So I can go into the inside area, and if I now leave it, we are going to the outside area. Let's try it again. And all of this is working just fine. Perfect. So with that, we have much nicer level transitions.
At this why point, does he not have the same problem as me?
Of the setup, we have a UI. So the last major thing that we have to add are items and the enemies. Meaning we are going to add...
I don't get this at all. Fuck. So if I don't have the reveal, okay, that does make sense. I don't need this. Is that what you're saying? Yeah. That's so weird. Hmm. I think I did notice that when we were playing with the animations that it does. It is important which one is selected here. Which is kind of weird because we call all the animations in code. Shouldn't be any different, but yeah.
The more interactive parts to the game. I want to start with the items, because that bit is quite a bit easier, and that way we can set up the interaction between the level, or rather the dynamic items of the level, with the player and the UI. I want to create one item, which is going to be a scene that gets a random value. It can either update the health, lasers, or grenades. On top of that, depending on what choice it has taken, it will get a different color. So for example, health is going to become green, lasers I think will become blue, and grenades will become red. Although the colors here are fairly random. At this point, all of this should be reasonably trivial. The only major challenge is going to be to wire up all of this with the player and the UI. For now, we're going to do all of that with signals.
The animation player setting properties in editor. You can have an auto-playing reset animation. That plays when the game starts. Ah, you can set the current animation here. Reset on save. And I think the editor is set up so that every time you press play, everything gets saved, right? Yeah, it's a little bit confusing. Okay.
I want to get started by creating a new scene, and now we have to think about what kind of setup we want. That will determine the root node. In my case, I want to have an area 2D. And right away, when we work with the collisions, I want to set this before I forget. The area 2D should only be on the 5th layer, which is going to be items and zones. It shouldn't be on anything else. On top of that, it should only be able to see the player and nothing else. Besides that, I would like to rename all of this. I suppose item would be a good name. On top of that, I want to have a sprite. The sprite we are getting from graphics, and in there we have items, and in items we have one file called orb2.png. This I want to drag into the texture, and there we go. We have some icon looking thingy. Once again, it is pure white because that allows us to use visibility and modulate and then set any custom color.
I don't get this spam messages, man. I get this all the time. Like once per stream. That's
Although
weird.
for now, I don't actually want to do that. We will work on that in just a second. Before that, I want to give this item a collision.
Just a sec. Okay.
Shape, which is going to be pretty simple. This is going to be a circle shape. And let's give it this kind of size. Looks about right. Now I can save all of that, and let's save it under scenes. And I guess we should create a new folder. Let's call it items and save it in there. now we have one item, and let's test it right away. I want to place one inside of the outside area, so item, and place it somewhere here. And then the same I want to do inside of the inside level and place an item in there as well, just to test if they are looking good. And the item right now is here. And let's place it in the dark so we can see what's going on. Also, earlier when I locked all of these lights, I kind of made a mistake. So with all of them selected, I want to unlock them. And this I have to do like so. Basically, when you want to lock all of the children of one particular node, in this case of all of the lights, you wouldn't select everyone individually and then lock them, because that is incredibly inefficient.
Yeah, just
Instead,
the parent.
You lock the parent node, but then you can still select the children. So there I can select, for example, the light. But what you can do on top of that, besides locking this layer, you can also select this icon. So you cannot select the children anymore. With that, I cannot select anything. And right now I am selecting the player. That kind of setup is significantly more efficient. Also, I want to lock the directional light. I may have done that earlier. Cool, but with that, we can try all of this. And now we can see one item. And if I go inside, we should be able to see another item. And I guess they work reasonably okay, although right now they're also on top of the player. But I think they should work better with some light. So besides the sprite 2D and the collision shape, I want to give this one a point light 2D. Next up, for the point light 2D, we will need a texture. For that, inside of lights, we have circle.png. I want to drag this in there. And now this one is a little bit too large. Let's change the scale to 0.2 and let's see how it looks. Possibly a bit too strong, and let's see how it looks indoor. Looks a bit better in here, but still I think a bit too much light. So I'm going to set the energy down to 0.5 and the texture to 0.4. And slight improvements, and this one is, I think, looking quite good actually. Once again, just play around with the values here and see what you like the most. In my case, I am happy with this, so I'm going to give the item a script, and this should be empty by default. So let's create it, and now we have a script for an area 2D. For this area 2D, what I want to start with is to make the entire item rotate. This I can do with the process function, and all I really have to do is get the rotation, and then increase it by some kind of rotation speed that doesn't exist right now. And don't forget, we want to multiply all of that with delta. Next up, we have to create a rotation speed variable, which has to be an integer. For the value, let's go with 5. I can run the game again, and now we get a rotation. Might be a little bit too fast. Let's say 4. But once again, just play around and see what looks best. Next up, I want to give this a type. And a item could either be a laser, it could be a grenade, or it could be a health upgrade. The value should be randomly assigned. And for that, we have to use an array. Yeah. An array, if you ever use Python, is basically a list. So in here, we can add the values that we want. For example, this could be a laser, this could be a grenade, or this could be health. Also, let me expand the window. Now we have an array with 3 values, and we want to pick one of them at random. We would be using indexing. So we would add another square brackets afterwards, and if we added a 0 in there, we would pick the first item. But I don't want to have a hard-coded first item. I want to get a random number.
Random? Yeah.
To achieve that, I'm going to get rid of the square brackets and rename this type to available options. And then on the next line, I'm going to create the actual type. And this type is going to be the available options. And this one is going to get the square brackets. Inside of there, I want to create a random number. And this I do with rand I. And this will create a random number. But this random number I want to limit to the length of this list. For that, I will need the modulus
2
operator and then the length of the available options. Once I have all of that, I can run the ready function and simply print what kind of type we are getting. Let's test all of this. And we're getting laser. If I try this again, we're getting grenade. Let's try it again. We're getting health. This is actually working incredibly well. And we're getting grenade, so this seems to be working just fine. Cool. With that, we get the different options that an item can take. But there's a bit of a problem right now. And that is that I want to prioritize the laser. So right now, we have a 1 in 3 chance to get a laser, a grenade, or a health upgrade. But this isn't exactly what I want. I want the lasers to be more likely. And to make that a thing, we can use a slight workaround. All we have to do is add the laser multiple times in this list, and that way getting the laser is significantly more likely. Although we could still get a grenade or a health upgrade. Next up, inside of the ready function, I want to use the type to give this item a color. This we can achieve with a simple if statement. So if the type is, for example, a laser, then I want to get the sprite 2D, use the...
Wait. I don't think it was very clear, and I saw that before the equal sign. I don't understand that. What does it say?
If statement. So if the type is, for example, a...
If type
laser, then I want to get the sprite 2D, use the modulate property, and give it a color that should be some shade of blue. And once again, for that, I can use an RGB value. So I want to specify a value for red, for green, and for blue. To keep this one simple, I'm going to give this 100% blue, no amount of green, and no amount of red. And with that, I can run the code, and there we already have something, although the blue might be a bit too strong. So let me go back in there. And there we can see, since we have reloaded the scene, we get a new kind of item. This we're gonna fix later, but for now, there we have a blue item again. Let's say instead of a 1, I want to have 0.6. And that is looking a bit better. Once again, if you play around with these numbers, let's say I want to increase the other values to 0.2 and 0.1. And now let's try this again. And that's looking a bit washed out, but you get the idea. I'm going to change this to 0.8, and now let's try it again. And this is a white item. There we go. I think this is looking decent. Which means next up, we can work on the other type, which will be the grenade. For this one, we can do the same thing we have done for the laser. So I can simply duplicate this line. And if we have a grenade, I want to have a red color, which means the red in the RGB tuple should be 0.8, and then the 0.8 for blue should be 0.1. To test this one, I am going to comment out the available options and then simply type in grenade. Let's try that one. And that's a decent-ish red color, so I'm quite happy with that.
Ironic. Can you tell me why in an if statement you don't use equals, it's equals?
Finally, I want to copy all of this one more time. The final value we want to look for is going to be health. For this one, I want to have 0.1 for red and blue and 0.8 for green. And to test this one, the type is going to be health. So let's try. And this is a decent green color. Cool. That means I can get rid of this testing string and then get a random option. Let's try that one, and it should still work. Yep, that is looking good.
Yeah, I noticed that you cannot tell in an if statement, like this needs to be exactly 0. You have to say it like smaller or equal 0 or... Yeah. Ah, sets the type to laser. Yeah, okay. So that's the difference between setting like a variable or telling it to do something and to check if it... Okay. Thank you.
Cool. With that, we get the right kind of color once we get an item.
It can be exact if it's an integer. Okay. Yeah, okay.
That is going to bring us to the slightly more complicated bit. And that is that we want to...
So wait, in that case, because rotation speed is an integer, you want to tell me that if I write if rotation speed equals 0. Yeah, that doesn't work. Still says the assignment is not allowed inside an expression. But this does work. Aha, or you just mean this makes sense just to check a single number if it's an integer, but it would make sense you would do like smaller or equal, right? If it's a float, because it would basically never reach exactly 0. Yeah, I think I get what you're saying.
Connect this item. If I go back to the scene, actually, I want to connect this item. If the player is touching it, I want to update, let's say, the player lasers and then the UI. And this is going to happen once the player touches the item, which gives us the first step. I want to go to Node and then have the item selected and then click on body entered. So once the player is entering the item, we can run a function. And since we get access to the player via the body, we can run a function directly body entered. So once the player is entering the item, we can run a function. And since we get access to the player via the body, we can run a function directly on the player. Basically, what I want to do is to get the body of the player and then use a function that I call add item. And this add item needs to know what kind of item we have, which we are getting from the type. Also, while we are here, once the player touched an item, I want to destroy the item, which we can do with Q3. And if I am able to type, this would be much easier done. Now we can work inside of a player and run an add item function. So let me find the player once again. There we go. And extend all of this. Also, I can minimize the process function for the player. And then work all the way at the bottom. We want to have a function called add item. This function needs to have one parameter, which is the type, which needs to be a string. And on top of that, this function should return nothing.
Bubbles, yeah. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So if oh my god, I wasn't showing the video the whole time. Oh no! Guys, you need to tell me things like this. God damn it. And the problem is the video is also muted when it's not shown.
Which
But okay.
gives us get UI and then update laser text.
So we have to do the same thing for the green now. But what I'm actually not sure is how does he know which text to update? Hmm. Update stats. because of this thing. Type. If type user close and on their up stats. Aha, it checks here for the global amount. Yeah, okay. So here we store it in the global amount, and here we send a signal to the level to check again. To the level? To the level and then to the UI. Okay. Yeah. So we now have to do the same thing here. So if type equals grenade, globals that grenade plus 2, let's say. Yeah, let's put the laser in. And then update the stats again. Actually, every time I pick up it stats, regardless of what it is. Then we go to the level on player update stats, update laser, update grenade. That should work already as it is. Let's see. Okay, it's 10. Come on, grenade. It's probably the seed is always gonna be blue, right? Doesn't randomize. Try this. There we go. Does the color change still work when I'm at 0? Yes, it does. Okay, cool. That seems to be working. Yeah, but the thing is, it seems like the way all of this is constructed, you can do it in a million different ways. To have this talk to that and things like that. And this add body seems like it's a add item. There's currently no description for this method. Can laser, can grenade. Oh wait, did he Mm. Aha, he called a function before he made it. That was kind of confusing. I thought this was like a inbuilt function, but it's not. He just wrote it here first. Where was it? In item. It was like body.add item type. But yeah, okay, so that's a custom function. Add item. Yeah, this is gonna be pretty interesting for important for the items and inventory and everything. But yeah, I think we got it.
This item is going to select a type when it access is a laser function, updating all of this. The problem is the UI doesn't know when it is supposed to be updated. So here we are updating the laser amount, but we're not and a bit. Once again, this is going to be really similar compared to the lasers. Pause the video now and try to work on that. First of all, I want to work inside of the item. In there, we are already getting the type for.
Yeah, because I figured, because if you have more than like 5 items, it's gonna be a pain in the ass, right? You would have a table and an array, and maybe have an Excel spreadsheet on the side or something. Right? Could you even, or a library with like a CSV file and get it like inside loaded in every time? I don't know how you would do it for like a huge RPG with millions of items. With like descriptions and stats. No, I kind of get it to have classes for instance, for different equipment slots, right? So like a helmet, gloves, things like that. Those would be classes, right? And then you would have an array, or I would do like an Excel spreadsheet with like item description, stats, well, maybe like a address to a sprite, and then kind of try and load it in every time you. I have no idea how would you do that. Like if you have a huge inventory, you know.
The grenade. So this one is working just fine, and we are still calling the onBodied entered function. Which means next up, we can work inside of the player. In there, we are only checking for the laser right now. Which means I can duplicate these lines and change the type to grenade. If that is the case, I want to update the grenade amount and increase it, let's say by 1. With that, we have an increased global amount, and we are also telling the UI to update, which we're doing via the signal. And since this inside of the level is covering both the laser and the grenade, we should be good to go. And just to test this inside of the item, I'm going to once again comment out the random item and instead get a grenade. With that, we should always get a red item, and that's looking good. And now we're getting 6 grenades. And everything else is still working just fine. Meaning now I can get rid of the grenade, and we have a random item again. So let's try this one more time. And there we have more lasers. Perfect. This covers the first important part, and in the next part, we're going to make all of this significantly more efficient. I'll see you there. For this part, we're going to cover setGet, which is a really powerful tool in Godot, but to understand why it is useful, let's talk about a problem. At the moment, when the player is colliding with an item, we are updating the player stats and the UI separately, which is getting really complex really fast. We have to work across multiple scenes, we have to use signals, and the game is still quite simple. If it became more complex, this would become a nightmare to manage. What would be much better is to have some kind of code that updates the UI automatically as soon as we are updating the player's stats. And all of this should work on a global level. To make that work, we will need set get. Basically, what this one allows us to do is to run code whenever the value of a variable is changed or accessed. For example, what we're going to do in this part is whenever the health of the player changes, we want to update the UI from the globals file, which we can do quite easily using set get. So let's look at that. Back in Godot, before
that seems very, very, very practical. Just like tweens, this seems that we use a lot.
we can start working on the actual set get, we have to make a few more changes. At the moment, let me work inside of the item. We are getting the type of health when we are creating an item. And this also updates the color. However, when we run on body entered, we are running add item, and this happens inside of the player. And in there, we are currently not checking if we are updating the health, which isn't possible because if I look at the globals, there we have an amount for the lasers and for the grenades, but there's nothing for health. For now, let's say I want to create another variable that I'm simply going to call health. And this is going to get a default value of 60. The value here, once again, doesn't matter. Although for the health bar, it would be easier if you choose a value between 0 and 100. Now that we have that, I want to work inside of the item. I want to update the global health, which once again is going to be an if statement. If the type is equal to health, then I want to get globals, update the health amount, and let's say increase it by an amount of 10. Now this is already going to work. For example,
wait. Why is he doing that here instead of inside the player where we have other if statements as well? This seems inconsistent in a way.
After this line of code, we could print globals and health. And also, just to test this, I want to once again comment out the random item and replace it with health. That is going to make testing all of this much easier. So now let's run it. And if I select it, we are getting 70, which would be the start amount of 60 plus 10. The thing is though, this did not update the UI. And with our current tools, there would be no easy way of doing that. Basically, what we would have to do, from inside of the item, we would have to go to the player, and then from the player, we would have to emit a signal, and then inside of the level, we would have to add another function inside of onPlayer update stats to make all of this work. And once again, this is not an efficient way of working. Instead, I want to do all of this inside of globals. Specifically, as soon as the health changes, I want to run a function. And to make that work, Godot has an extra functionality. What I want to do is I want to add a colon after the 60. Once I have that, I can basically add two functions inside of this variable. The first one, you just need the name, would be called get. And in there, I am just going to add pass for now, but we are going to add something else in there in just a second. Besides there, you can add a set, and this one needs a parameter called value. Also in there for now, I simply want to add pass. What this is going to do, it is going to influence how you're working with this variable. Get determines what happens when you're reading this variable. And just to demonstrate, right now, inside of the item, when the player is colliding, we are updating the value of health and we are printing it, which means we are writing on the value and we are reading the value. And both of those are set with get and set. If you're trying to read a value, so for example using the print statement, you would trigger the get function, and if you're trying to update the value, you would trigger the set function. if we are trying to get the value, I simply want to print health value was red. Then I can duplicate all of this, and instead of setting a value, we can write the health value was changed. And now, if I run the game again, we're going to get some really strange behavior. If I get the item, we are getting an error that we have nil and int operator with plus, and this is happening down there. For now, let me simply comment out this part so I can demonstrate what's happening. Now, if I collide with it, we get health value was red and null. That is because when we are currently trying to print globals.health, we are triggering this get method, which is printing health method was red. On top of that, this get method is always returning a value. And if we don't specify that value, it is going to be
Hey,
null.
Chocolate.
And this is what
How's
we
it going?
printed on the second time via this print statement. Most of the time, print doesn't actually do anything complicated. Instead, what you would do is you return the value itself of the variable. That way, when you try to print it, let me demonstrate this actually, you are simply getting 60, which
No, this is new. I haven't been doing this. I haven't done this.
means inside of the item, we are trying to access globals.health. So globals.health is looking at the variable, it sees a get function, and it returns whatever this function returns. Currently, the value of the variable itself. Set works somewhat in the same way. Although for this one, we want to update the variable. Which means in this case, to get this variable to work
Health
normally,
equals value.
we want to get health and then set it to the value we are getting. Set is looking for a way to update this health. And the value we are getting is any kind of change that could happen. For example, inside of item, if we are updating globals.health by increasing it by 10, then the resulting value is going to be the value of this parameter, which means if I print the value, run all of this again, we are getting 70 twice. Because this value is the result of this operation. And we are printing that, and we are setting it as the value for health, which means we are updating this variable. The best way to think about setGet is that we are simply attaching two functions to a variable. One is triggered when we are getting the value, the other is triggered when we are setting the value. That's literally all that's happening here. And all of that is really useful because now we can run other functions once this value is updating. The way we would be using this is, in my case, I created a new signal. And this signal I call health change. And as soon as we are updating the health value, so we are setting a new value, I want to emit this health change. So health change dot emit. And this health signal we can capture everywhere because globals is available globally. So for example, inside of the UI, we can also work with it. Although for that to work, we first of all have to work inside of the ready function. Because right now, if I simply run the UI on its own, so I'm simply running this one scene, which doesn't do anything. But if I click there on remote, we have globals, and inside of globals, we can emit a signal. But this signal right now is not connected to the UI script. This we have to do manually. But that is quite easily done. All we have to do is get the global script and then connect a signal. The signal we want to connect is called health_change. Godot is predicting it already. And if we're getting that signal, we want to run a function. For example, this could be update health. Actually, to be a bit more specific, update health text. Now, next up, we have to create this function. And let me put it somewhere here. I want to update health text, which is a function. And this one, for now, is going to print globals and then the health that the player has. Next up, inside of the item, I don't want to print globals.health anymore, just to keep things simple. Also, inside of globals, we are not printing anything. So now if I run this again, we should only see 70 once. And we do. And this 70, we are printing from inside of the UI. This function to be a bit more specific. But we don't actually want to print it. Instead, we want to get the health bar and then update the value. And for that, like we have done with the other nodes, I want to, on ready, create a variable. Let's call it the health bar. This one has to be a texture progress bar. And the value for that, we can simply drag in there. I want to get this texture progress bar, drag it, so I can capture it in a variable. Now that I have that, I can get the health bar and set the value, and the value should be globals.health. And with that, we are good to go. If I now run the game and I collect the item, we are changing the health amount. Now, if you look at this closely, you can see the value changed. And that is because if I go back inside of texture progress bar, we have a minimum value, a maximum value, and then a start value of 80, which is different from what we have inside of globals. In there, we are starting with, there we have globals, we are starting with 60. So this we have to update. That we are going to do inside of the UI. We have ready, and there we want to get the health bar, and then set the value to globals.health. And now if I run this, we have slightly more than half of the health, and if I collect the item, we are increasing it by an amount of 10. Also, this code is now a bit inconsistent because I'm using a function for the laser and the grenade, but for the health, I am setting the value individually. So for that, I want to use the function as well, and that's feeling a bit cleaner. With that, we have the health functionality. And I really hope you get a sense of why this kind of system is much more efficient. We are basically bypassing the player entirely. So while for the laser and the grenade, we have to go through the player and then emit a signal, health doesn't need any of that. We are simply working inside of the item, and in there, we are updating the global health amount. And that is literally it. We don't do anything else. The entirety of the logic happens inside of globals, and in there, we are updating the value, and if that is the case, we are emitting a signal. And then this signal is telling the UI in there to update the health text. Just imagine we had a much more complex game across lots of scenes, and maybe a level is inside of another scene, and this scene could be inside of another scene. We would have to use signals consistently across multiple scenes, which would get incredibly confusing. But with our system, we are always targeting the UI basically directly. And on top of that, we are addressing it from the global scope, so from globals.gd. Let's do an exercise to make sure you understand. I want you guys to update the grenade and laser logic to also use setGet, like we have done for the health part. On top of that, remove the signal logic so we're not cluttering up the code. Pause the video now and try to implement that.
I'm having a huge problem. I'm having a really bad headache coming on. That's why I've been massaging my fucking forehead the whole time, and this is a bit much. I think I'm gonna have to call it for today. Creating crates. Expanding the inside level. Creating the scout. Creating the grenade. Scout and health. Player health. Shaders. What's in the next one? What we still need to get to? Is there a link here for the second one? Oh. Wait. Part 2. think there was a shorter video that was a part 2 to this. Am I crazy?
I still...
Ah, second part. There we go. Oh, this is a lot because it seems that you can do this in a million different ways, and I need to figure out set and get a little bit more. Okay, what do we have here? Bug enemy. I think that's an enemy that's actually made up of more parts. And that we do some kind of bone structure. And then for the animation, I think. That looks cool. Drone enemy. Oh, we do a car as well, yeah. Pathfinding, that's gonna be very important. And bone, oh, there's the bone animation, okay. Oh, that's gonna be cool, look at this. Okay, guys, I'm gonna have to call it. I have a headache coming on, which is not a good idea. Programming and learning and watching and doing that. And during that. So, I thought I was gonna stream the whole day today. But that's just not gonna work. I'm really sorry. I might stream tomorrow. And because I don't have... Because I would want to get through this and maybe even start on my own thing. Finally, I did do some tile maps and things like that, but even to be perfectly honest, I don't think I needed to just start. But yeah, thank you all for watching and joining, and join the Discord, have fun, you know, start learning, do the thing you wanted to do. And I'll see you guys probably tomorrow. Have fun, kissy kissy, bye.